At my 70th birthday dinner, my son Michael raised his glass, eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite read. The restaurant hummed around us. Waiters gliding between tables, the soft clink of silverware, murmured conversations. My three other children sat frozen, sensing the shift in the air before I did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dad, Michael said, his voice carrying over the ambient noise. This will be your last year with us. The table fell silent, my fork suspended midway to my mouth. I looked into the face of my youngest son, the boy who once climbed trees in our backyard, who cried when his model airplane crashed, who called me every Sunday for 40 years without fail. My other children stared at their plates, tension visible in their shoulders. Rebecca, my oldest, gripped her napkin so tightly her knuckles whitened. Thomas couldn't meet my eyes, and Sarah's mouth had formed a tight, disapproving line. I set my fork down slowly, feeling the weight of 70 years in my joints. I see, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And you've all decided this? I looked around the table, watching them exchange guilty glances. Dad, Rebecca started, her voice gentle as if speaking to a child. We've talked about this. The house is too big for you now. The stairs are dangerous. You've had 2 falls this year alone. The retirement community is beautiful, Thomas added quickly. We toured it last week. There's a garden, activities every day, people your age, people my age, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. You mean old people waiting to die? Sarah reached for my hand. Dad, please, it's for your own good. We're worried about you living alone. I looked at each of their faces. These children I had raised, whose skinned knees I had bandaged, whose tears I had dried, whose college tuitions I had paid by working double shifts at the factory. They had grown into strangers who thought they knew what was best for me. I agree, I said finally. Michael blinked, clearly surprised by my easy capitulation. You do? Yes. This will be my last year with you all. I took a deliberate sip of water. But not because I'm moving to any retirement home. Dad, Rebecca began, but I held up my hand. I've been planning something for a while now, I continued. Something I should have done years ago, after your mother passed. I'm selling the house, yes. But I'm not retiring to any community. I'm going to see the world. The silence that followed was profound. I could almost hear them processing my words, reconciling them with the compliant father they thought they knew. What do you mean, see the world? Michael asked finally, disbelief etched on his face. I smiled, enjoying their confusion more than I should have. Exactly what I said. I've spent 70 years in this town. 45 of them working at the factory. Your mother and I always talked about traveling after retirement, but then she got sick. I paused, the familiar ache of her absence never quite gone. I've saved enough. The house will sell for a good price. I've already renewed my passport. But Dad, your health, Sarah protested. My health is fine, I interrupted firmly. Dr. Levine gave me a clean bill just last month. The falls were accidents. Anyone could slip on a wet floor or miss a step in the dark. But you'll be all alone, Rebecca said, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. I've been alone for 5 years since your mother died, I replied, not unkindly. And frankly, none of you live close enough to visit more than holidays anyway. The truth of this statement hung in the air. Rebecca lived in Boston with her family, Thomas in Chicago, Sarah in Denver, and Michael in Seattle. After their mother died, they had each suggested I sell the house and move closer to one of them, but never quite managed to make concrete plans to accommodate me. Where would you even go? Thomas asked, clearly still processing. I had been waiting for this question. Italy first. Your mother always wanted to see Venice. Then Greece. Maybe Egypt. I've been taking language courses online for the past year. Online courses? Michael echoed. You can barely use your email. I fixed him with a level gaze. I've learned a lot of things you don't know about, son. When was the last time you called just to chat? Not to check if I'd fallen or forgotten to take my medication. Michael had the grace to look ashamed. The question lingered unanswered. Look, I said, softening my tone. I appreciate that you all care. I do. But I'm not senile, and I'm not an invalid. I'm 70, not dead. And I've made my decision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca, always the practical one, seemed to be calculating risks and variables. Have you really thought this through? Travel insurance at your age will be expensive. What about your medications? Regular checkups? What if something happens while you're abroad? I nodded, acknowledging her concerns. I've researched international health insurance. Yes, it's expensive, but I can afford it. As for medications, they have pharmacies in Europe, you know. And doctors, too. But the language barrier, she continued, will be a challenge. I finished for her. One I'm looking forward to. I told you, I've been studying. Not fluent by any means, but enough to get by. And there's technology now, translation apps and such. Sarah, who had been quiet, suddenly looked up with tears in her eyes. Is this because we haven't visited enough? Because we've been too busy with our own lives? Her vulnerability caught me off guard. I reached across the table and took her hand. No, sweetheart. This isn't about punishing any of you. This is about me finally living for myself. I spent my whole life working and raising you all, which I would never change, but now it's my turn. When were you planning to tell us? Thomas asked. I could see him shifting into acceptance, always the first to adapt to new situations. Tonight, actually, I admitted, though I planned to break it to you more gently. Michael forced my hand. I gave my youngest son a wry smile. Michael, looking somewhat abashed, cleared his throat. So you already have a plan in place? I do, I confirmed. The house goes on the market next week. I've already sorted through most of your mother's things. Kept what matters. Donated the rest. My flight to Rome leaves in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Rebecca exclaimed. That's so soon. I shrugged. At my age, there's no time to waste. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of questions, concerns, and gradually, reluctant acceptance. By dessert, Thomas was showing me travel apps on his phone, Sarah was offering to help me pack, and Rebecca was making notes about international phone plans. Only Michael remained quiet, watching the transformation with an unreadable expression. As we left the restaurant, Michael pulled me aside while the others waited for the valet. Dad, he said, his voice low, are you sure about this? Really sure. I studied his face, the face that most resembled his mother's, and saw genuine worry there. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, son. But why now? He pressed. Why not tell us sooner? I sighed, feeling the weight of unspoken truths. Because I knew you'd all react exactly as you did. You'd worry, you'd try to talk me out of it, you'd make me doubt myself. I needed to be certain before I faced that. And you're not scared? Not even a little? I laughed then, a real laugh that felt good in my chest. Terrified, but that's how I know it's the right choice. I haven't felt this alive in years. The valet arrived with Thomas's car, and the others called for us to hurry. Michael hesitated, then pulled me into a tight hug. Call us, he murmured. Wherever you go, whatever you see. Call us. I hugged him back, surprised by the sudden emotion tightening my throat. I will, I promise. As I watched them drive away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The night air was crisp against my face, carrying the faint scent of approaching autumn. I thought of my house, soon to be someone else's, and felt no regret, only anticipation. The 6 weeks before my departure passed in a whirlwind. My children, having accepted my decision with varying degrees of reluctance, turned their energy toward ensuring I was prepared. Rebecca researched the best travel insurance and made detailed spreadsheets of emergency contacts in each country I planned to visit. Thomas loaded my new smartphone with apps for translation, navigation, and video calling. Sarah helped me sort through the last of my possessions, deciding what to store, what to give away, and what few precious items to take with me. Michael, to everyone's surprise, including my own, took a week off work to help me prepare the house for sale. We painted walls, fixed leaky faucets, and tended to the garden that had been his mother's pride and joy. "She would have loved this, you know," he said one evening as we sat on the porch, tired from a day of work. "Mom always wanted to travel." I nodded, memories washing over me. "She had a travel journal. Did you know that? Full of places she wanted to see. I found it after she died." "Is that what gave you the idea?" he asked quietly. I looked at the garden, at the rose bushes Eleanor had planted 30 years ago. "Partly. But it was something she said, right near the end. She made me promise not to waste whatever time I had left." I turned to Michael, seeing the emotion in his eyes. "I've wasted 5 years already, son. I don't intend to waste any more." The real estate agent had warned me that houses in our neighborhood typically took months to sell. But to everyone's surprise, we received a full-price offer within a week. The buyers, a young couple with 2 small children, fell in love with Eleanor's garden and the marks on the kitchen doorframe where I had measured each of my children's heights over the years. "It's perfect," the young woman had said during their viewing, eyes shining. "I can see our family growing here." The day of closing, I stood in the empty living room, memories echoing from every corner. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, arguments and reconciliations, the ordinary moments that had made up my life. I placed my hand on the wall, feeling the solidity of the home that had sheltered us, and whispered a goodbye. The airport was a chaos of noise and movement. My children had insisted on accompanying me to the gate, hovering anxiously as I checked in and navigated security. "You have your medication in your carry-on?" Rebecca asked for the 3rd time. "Yes, along with my insurance information, emergency contacts, and a change of clothes." I recited patiently. "Don't forget to text us when you land," Thomas reminded me. "And use the Wi-Fi calling if the international plan doesn't work right away." "I will," I promised, patting the phone in my pocket. Sarah hugged me tightly. "Take care of yourself, Dad. Don't do anything too adventurous." I laughed. Define too adventurous. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. I turned to Michael, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. "Well?" I said. "This is it." He nodded, throat working. "This is it." I looked at my 4 children, grown now, with lives and families of their own, and felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly took my breath away. "I'm not running away," I told them. "I'm just finding my way forward." "We know, Dad," Rebecca said, tears in her eyes. "We're proud of you." I hugged each of them one last time, then turned and walked through the gate without looking back. As the plane lifted into the sky, I watched my hometown shrink beneath me until it disappeared into the patchwork landscape of America. I felt a curious mixture of grief and liberation, an ending and a beginning. 16 hours later, I emerged into the golden light of a Roman morning. The air smelled different. Ancient stone, espresso, unfamiliar blossoms. I caught a taxi to my small rented apartment in Trastevere, fumbling with my limited Italian. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, switched to English when he realized I was struggling. "First time in Rome?" he asked, navigating through narrow streets teeming with life. "First time anywhere," I replied truthfully. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Never too late to start, eh?" I smiled, fatigue momentarily forgotten. That's what I'm counting on. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building with no elevator, a fact that would have horrified my children had they known. I climbed the stairs slowly, my suitcase bumping behind me, and unlocked the door to my home for the next month. It was small, but charming, with tall windows that opened onto a view of terracotta rooftops and distant church domes. The furniture was simple but comfortable, the kitchenette tiny but functional. I set my suitcase down and walked to the window, opening it wide to let in the sounds and smells of the city. Church bells rang in the distance. Somewhere nearby, someone was cooking with garlic and tomatoes. Voices called to each other in musical Italian. I closed my eyes, letting it all wash over me. "I made it, Eleanor," I whispered to the empty room. "I made it." I spent that first day walking until my feet ached, deliberately losing myself in the labyrinth of ancient streets. I ate gelato in the shadow of the Pantheon, watched the sunset from the Spanish Steps, and tossed a coin into the Trevi fountain, making a wish I kept to myself. That night, I video-called my children as promised, showing them my apartment and the view from my window. They exclaimed over what they could see, asked 1,000 questions, and reminded me to take my medication. I answered patiently, reassuring them that I was safe, happy, and already in love with Rome. As weeks became months, and Rome gave way to Florence, Venice, and beyond, my calls home became less frequent. Not because I forgot or didn't care, but because I was living fully in each moment, accumulating experiences I had never imagined possible. I celebrated my 71st birthday at a small taverna on a Greek island, where the owner, upon learning it was my birthday, brought out a cake and led the entire restaurant in singing, partly in Greek, partly in broken English. I sent my children photos of the celebration, of the impossibly blue sea beyond the taverna's terrace, of the new friends I had made. "You look different, Dad," Sarah remarked during our next video call. "Younger somehow." I laughed. "It's the Mediterranean sun. Gives everyone a healthy glow." But it was more than that, and we both knew it. I had discovered something about myself in these months of traveling. A resilience, a curiosity, a joy in simple pleasures that had lain dormant for too long. In Egypt, I rode a camel at dawn, watching the sun rise over the pyramids. In Morocco, I got lost in the souks of Marrakesh and was guided back to my hotel by a schoolboy who refused payment but accepted my fountain pen as a gift. In Turkey, I floated above the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia in a hot air balloon, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. And everywhere I went, I collected stories, not just my own, but those of the people I met. The Italian grandmother who taught me to make proper pasta in her tiny kitchen. The Greek fisherman who spoke no English but showed me how to cast a net by the light of the moon. The Egyptian archaeologist who gave me a private tour of a tomb not yet open to the public because, as he said, "Your eyes have the hunger to truly see." When winter approached, I headed southeast to Thailand, then Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. I celebrated Christmas with a family in Hanoi who had adopted me after I helped their daughter practice her English. They dressed me in traditional clothing, fed me dishes I couldn't pronounce but devoured eagerly, and treated me like a treasured elder rather than a burden. I sent my children photos of this celebration too, along with small, carefully chosen gifts from each country I visited. A silk scarf for Rebecca, hand-woven and dyed with indigo by women in a northern Thai village. A carved chest set for Thomas, each piece representing a character from Cambodian mythology. A silver pendant for Sarah, crafted by a street artisan in Luang Prabang. And for Michael, a journal bound in soft leather, the pages handmade from mulberry bark, with a note inside, "For your own adventures, whenever you're ready." As my last year with my children stretched into a second, then a third, they stopped asking when I was coming home. Home had become a fluid concept. Sometimes a rented room overlooking rice paddies in Bali, sometimes a homestay with a family in rural Japan, sometimes a small apartment in a bustling city like Bangkok or Kyoto. In Japan, I found myself drawn to the concept of ikigai, the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Though I was no longer working for pay, I discovered my ikigai in sharing stories and wisdom with younger travelers I met in hostels and guest houses. They sought me out, this odd American septuagenarian with weathered skin and bright eyes, to ask about the temples I'd visited or the best local food spots. "How did you decide to just leave everything behind?" A young Canadian woman asked me one evening as we sat in the courtyard of a hostel in Kyoto. Cherry blossoms floated down around us like pink snow. "I didn't leave everything behind," I corrected gently. "I brought the important things with me." I tapped my heart. The rest was just stuff. She looked unconvinced. But weren't you scared? I mean, you're old? I finished for her, laughing. Terrified. Still am sometimes. But fear is a terrible reason not to do something that calls to you. Word spread among the backpacker community about the traveling grandpa, as they affectionately called me. Young people began seeking me out, sharing meals and stories. I taught them card games from my youth. They showed me how to use Instagram. I told them about life before the internet. They explained cryptocurrency to me with varying degrees of success. In return for my stories, they often helped me navigate unfamiliar technology or physical challenges. When my knee acted up in the mountains of northern Japan, 2 young German hikers fashioned a walking stick for me and took turns carrying my backpack. When I couldn't decipher the complex Tokyo subway system, a local university student not only guided me to my destination, but spent the entire afternoon showing me her favorite hidden corners of the city. "Why are you being so kind to a stranger?" I asked her as we shared takoyaki in a tiny street stall. She looked surprised by the question. "My grandmother always says that how we treat the elderly shows who we really are," she replied simply. "Besides, you're having an adventure. I respect that." As my travels continued, I began to shed possessions rather than acquire them. My backpack grew lighter, containing only essentials and a few treasured items. Eleanor's well-worn travel journal, now filled with my own notes in the margins, a small photo album, and the fountain pen that had been a gift from my father on my college graduation. I learned to live simply, to wash clothes in hotel sinks and dry them on balcony railings, to bargain in marketplaces using hand gestures and smiles when language failed me. I discovered that most problems could be solved with patience, a sense of humor, and the universal language of kindness. There were hard days, of course. Days when my body reminded me of its age through aching joints or unexpected fatigue. Days when language barriers led to frustration or loneliness. Days when I missed the familiar American coffee, conversations without struggling for words, the faces of my children. On those days, I would find a quiet place, a park bench, a temple garden, a seaside cliff, and take out Eleanor's journal. Sometimes I read her words, dreams written decades ago that I was now living for both of us. Other times I wrote my own reflections, conversations with her that kept her close despite time and distance. "I saw Mount Fuji today, Elle," I wrote one evening. "It was exactly as you imagined, majestic, serene, somehow both imposing and welcoming. I watched the sunset turn it pink, then gold, then deep blue. A young couple nearby was taking photos, and the man asked if I wanted him to take my picture. I said yes, and then found myself telling them about you, about how we'd planned to see it together someday." The woman cried. She took my hands and said something in Japanese that I couldn't understand, but I felt it here. I tapped my heart, as I had with the Canadian woman. Some things don't need translation. It was during my stay in a small coastal town in southern Japan that I received a message from Michael that changed the trajectory of my journey. "Dad," he wrote, "I need your advice. I've been offered a job in Singapore. It's a great opportunity, but I'm scared to take such a big leap. Sarah says I should play it safe and stay in Seattle. What do you think?" I sat on the tatami floor of my ryokan, staring at the message on my phone. 3 years ago, before my journey began, I would have agreed with Sarah, advised caution, security, the known path. But now, I typed my reply slowly, considering each word. The question isn't whether you should take the job in Singapore. The question is, when you're my age, which decision will you regret more, going or staying? Fear is a poor compass, son. Let curiosity be your guide instead. 2 weeks later, he sent me a photo of his one-way ticket to Singapore. "I took your advice," he wrote. Terrified but excited. "Any chance you could meet me there? Help me get settled?" I felt a surge of emotion, pride, joy, a touch of anxiety. My wandering had been solitary by design, a journey of self-discovery. But perhaps it was time for a new kind of adventure, one shared with my youngest son who was finally taking his own leap into the unknown. "I'll be there," I replied. "Just tell me when." Singapore was a shock to my system after the tranquil pace of rural Japan, a gleaming metropolis of soaring skyscrapers, tropical heat, and dizzying diversity. Michael arrived a day after I did, and we met in the vast atrium of his company-arranged temporary housing. The moment I saw him, I realized how much I'd missed him. Missed all my children. He looked older somehow, though it had been only 3 years. There were new lines around his eyes, a touch of gray at his temples that hadn't been there before. "Dad!" he called, spotting me across the lobby. He rushed over, enveloping me in a hug that lifted me slightly off my feet. "Look at you! You're so tan!" I laughed, returning his embrace. "And you're going gray, son. It suits you." We spent the first week exploring the city together, navigating the efficient subway system, sampling the incredible variety of foods in the hawker centers, marveling at the gardens by the bay with their futuristic super trees and climate-controlled biodomes. In the evenings, we sat on the balcony of his temporary apartment, sipping tiger beer and talking in a way we never had before, as equals, as adults with experiences to share rather than father and son with a hierarchy to maintain. "I can't believe you've been doing this for 3 years, he said one night, gesturing vaguely at the world beyond the balcony. "Just going wherever you want, figuring it out as you go. It gets easier," I told him. "The first step is the hardest." He nodded, contemplative. "That dinner, your birthday, when I said it would be your last year with us. I thought I was doing the right thing. We all did. We were so worried about you." "I know," I said gently. "You meant well. But we were wrong," he continued. "You're more alive now than you've been since Mom died. Maybe even before that." He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time. "You've changed." I smiled. "That's what life is supposed to do, son. Change us." Right up until the end. After Michael started his new job, I stayed on in Singapore, finding a small room to rent in a quieter neighborhood. I became his weekend companion, his cultural interpreter drawing on my years of travel experience, his sounding board as he adjusted to expat life. "You should meet the others," he said one Sunday as we walked through the Botanic Gardens. "They miss you." "The others?" I echoed, though I knew exactly whom he meant. "Rebecca, Thomas, Sarah. The kids. They ask about you all the time. Rebecca's son Jack is starting college in the fall. Can you believe it?" I stopped walking, suddenly aware of how much time had passed, how many milestones I had missed. Jack had been 15 when I left, a gangly teenager with braces and a passion for soccer. Now he was a young man, heading to college. "I've been gone too long," I murmured, more to myself than to Michael. He looked at me with understanding. "No one's blaming you, Dad. We all get it now. Why you needed to go. What you've been doing. But maybe it's time for a visit." I finished for him. The decision to return to America, even temporarily, filled me with a curious mixture of anticipation and trepidation. I had left as one person and would return as another. Would my children see the difference? Would they understand what these years had given me? I chose Boston as my first stop, Rebecca's home. She met me at Logan Airport, her husband and 2 children beside her. I spotted them as soon as I emerged from customs, Rebecca scanning the crowd anxiously, Jack towering beside her, his younger sister Emma fidgeting with nervous energy. "Grandpa!" Emma was the first to see me, breaking away from her parents to run toward me. At 13, she was caught between childhood and adolescence, but in that moment she was simply my granddaughter, flinging herself into my arms with unrestrained joy. The others followed, Rebecca hugging me tightly, tears in her eyes, her husband Daniel shaking my hand warmly, and Jack, so grown up now, giving me an awkward but sincere embrace. "You look different," Rebecca said, studying my face. "Healthy." I smiled. 3 years of walking will do that. "And thinner," she added with a mother's concern. "Are you eating enough?" Some things never changed. The week with Rebecca and her family was a gentle reintroduction to American life. I shared stories of my travels over dinner, showed photos on my tablet, a technology I had mastered out of necessity, and listened to their news. Jack's college plans, Emma's soccer championships, Rebecca's promotion, Daniel's new hobby of brewing beer in their garage. In the quiet moments, Rebecca and I talked more deeply. One morning, as we sat in her kitchen while the others were out, she confessed, "I was so angry when you left. I thought you were being selfish. I was, I acknowledged. Sometimes selfishness is necessary. She considered this. I understand that now. Watching you these past 3 years, seeing how you've thrived, it changed how I think about aging, about life. How so? I always thought getting older meant gradually giving things up. Adventures, risks, new experiences. But you've shown me it can mean the opposite. She reached for my hand across the table. Thank you for that lesson, Dad. From Boston, I traveled to Chicago to see Thomas and his family, then to Denver for Sarah. Each reunion followed a similar pattern: initial shock at how I had changed, joyful reconnection, the sharing of stories and photographs, and eventually, deeper conversations about what my journey had meant to all of us. Thomas, always the practical one, had organized my financial affairs during my absence, ensuring my modest retirement funds were properly managed. You've actually spent less traveling than you would have at home, he informed me with surprise. How is that possible? I learned to live with less, I explained. And in many places my dollars stretched further. Plus, no property taxes, no home repairs, no car payments. Sarah, my worrier, had found her own peace with my choices. I used to have nightmares about you getting sick in some foreign country where no one spoke English, she confessed. But then you sent that picture from the hospital in Thailand. I laughed, remembering. I had developed a minor infection in Chiang Mai and spent 2 nights in a local hospital. Rather than hide it from my children, I had sent them a cheerful selfie from my hospital bed, surrounded by smiling Thai nurses who had adopted me as their special project. The care was excellent, I reminded her, and half the price it would have been in the States. Sarah nodded. That's when I realized you were going to be okay. That you could handle whatever came your way. As I traveled between my children's homes, I noticed changes in myself as well. America felt both familiar and strange, the language effortless after years of linguistic struggles, yet the pace exhausting, the portions enormous, the conversations often superficial. I found myself missing the rhythm of travel, the daily discoveries, the friends I had made around the world. I missed the freedom of movement, of reinvention, of waking each morning not knowing exactly what the day might bring. One evening, sitting on Sarah's porch in Denver, watching the sunset paint the distant Rockies gold and pink, I realized I was at another crossroads. My last year with my children had stretched into 3, and those years had transformed us all. My grand adventure had served its purpose, awakening me from grief, showing me my own strength, healing old wounds between my children and me. But what now? Should I settle near one of them, becoming the grandfather who was present for soccer games and school plays? Should I return to my wandering life, collecting more stories, more sunsets? Or was there a third path, one I hadn't yet imagined? Sarah brought me a cup of tea, settling into the chair beside me. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, an expression our mother had used often. I smiled at the memory. "I'm thinking about what comes next." She sipped her tea, watching the mountains with me. "And what have you decided?" "I haven't," I admitted. "For the first time in years, I don't have a plan." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, when you first left, we all thought you were running away. But you weren't, were you? You were running towards something." I considered her words. Maybe both. I needed distance from who I had been. But I also needed to discover who I could still become. And have you? Discovered that, I mean. I thought of the past 3 years, the temples of Japan, the beaches of Thailand, the ancient cities of Europe, the deserts of Morocco. I thought of the people I had met, the meals I had shared, the sunrises I had witnessed from places Eleanor and I had only dreamed about. "I think," I said slowly, "that who we are is always evolving. There's no final discovery, no moment when we can say, 'This is who I am, completely and forever.' Life keeps shaping us until it ends." Sarah leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture she hadn't made since childhood. "Well, whoever you're becoming, Dad, I like him." We sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the mountains. And in that moment, I felt the first stirrings of a new idea. A third path that would honor both the wanderer I had become and the father and grandfather I had always been. The next morning, I called a family meeting, virtual for those not in Denver, in person for Sarah and her husband. I had made my decision, and now I needed to share it with them. I had been thinking about what comes next. I began when they were all assembled, faces looking at me expectantly from Sarah's laptop screen and from around her dining table. And I've realized something important. These past 3 years have given me more than I ever expected. Adventures, yes, but also purpose, community, a new way of seeing the world and my place in it. I paused, looking at each of their faces. My children, their spouses, my grandchildren peering curiously into the camera. I'm not ready to stop traveling, I continued, but I'm also not willing to miss any more of your lives, any more milestones or Sunday dinners or ordinary Tuesday afternoons. So what will you do? Rebecca asked, her face serious on the screen. I smiled. I'm going to build a new kind of life. 6 months of the year, I'll travel, continuing to explore, to learn, to collect stories. But the other 6 months, I'll be here, rotating between your homes if you'll have me, being present in your lives. Like a migratory grandfather, Thomas suggested, his lips quirking in amusement. Exactly, I agreed. In winter, I'll seek warmer climates, Thailand perhaps, or southern Spain. In summer, I'll return to America, to all of you. And holidays? Michael asked from his apartment in Singapore. I thought we might start a new tradition, I replied. Each year, one of you could join me somewhere in the world for Christmas or Thanksgiving. We could explore together, create new memories in places none of us have been before. There was a moment of silence as they considered my proposal. Then, one by one, they began to nod. I think it's brilliant, Sarah said from beside me, squeezing my hand. It's unconventional, Rebecca admitted. But so are you, Dad, and we wouldn't want it any other way. The transition to my new migratory lifestyle proved more seamless than any of us expected. That first year, I wintered in southern Spain, renting a small apartment in Malaga where the Mediterranean sun kept my old bones warm while America shivered under snow. I joined a local language exchange, offering English conversation in return for help with my still rudimentary Spanish. 3 times a week, I met with Carlos, a retired professor who shared my love of history and my dry sense of humor. Why would an American your age choose to live so far from his family? He asked one afternoon as we sat in a plaza, playing chess and sipping strong coffee. I'm not far from them, I replied, moving my knight. I'm exactly where I should be. He nodded, thoughtfully, capturing my bishop. The right distance allows for perspective. Too close, and you cannot see the whole picture. Too far, and you miss the details. Jacques-Mat, I said, surprising him with a move I'd been planning for 3 turns. And that's exactly why I travel. When spring arrived, I returned to America, beginning with Thomas in Chicago. His children were older, teenagers now, busy with their own lives. But I found unexpected connections with them. Mia, 16 and artistic, was fascinated by my sketches of temples and markets. I taught her how to capture a scene quickly, the essential lines and shadows that tell a story in a few strokes. How did you learn to draw like this? She asked, watching me sketch the Chicago skyline from their apartment window. Necessity, I explained. When language fails, art speaks. In a village in Laos, I couldn't communicate with words, but I could draw what I needed. Food, directions, a place to sleep. I handed her the sketchbook. Your turn. Don't think too much. Just capture what you see. Her brother Alex, 18 and preparing for college, was more interested in the philosophical aspects of my travels. Late one night, I found him in the kitchen, unable to sleep, worrying about his future. What if I choose wrong, he asked, picking at a bowl of cereal. What if I study business but should have done engineering? Or vice versa. How did you know what to do with your life? I laughed gently. I didn't. I worked in a factory for 45 years because it paid the bills, not because it was my passion. I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from him. But here's what I've learned. Life isn't a single choice. It's thousands of small decisions that add up to a journey. Some doors close, yes, but others open. That sounds like a greeting card, he said, but he was smiling a little. Maybe so, I conceded. But think about it this way. At 70, I reinvented myself completely. If I could do that after decades of the same routine, imagine what you can do with your whole life ahead of you. He considered this, stirring his cereal thoughtfully. I never thought about it that way before. Most people don't, I said. We trap ourselves in cages of our own making, convinced we have no options. But the door is usually unlocked if we're brave enough to push it. Quote, "The summer months flew by as I moved between my children's homes, settling into each for a few weeks before moving to the next. I found joy in the ordinary moments, helping Sarah plant her garden, teaching Rebecca's daughter Emma to make Eleanor's famous apple pie, attending Alex's high school graduation. In Denver, Sarah and I hiked in the foothills of the Rockies. She had taken up photography, and we would stop often so she could capture a wildflower, a distant peak, the play of light through aspen leaves. You've changed how I see things," she told me one afternoon as we rested on a fallen log, drinking water and catching our breath. "Before you left, I was so focused on security, on playing it safe, I worried about everything. And now?" I asked, watching a hawk circle overhead. "Now I understand that safety isn't just about avoiding risks. Sometimes it's about taking the right ones." She smiled. "Paul and I are planning a sabbatical next year. 3 months in New Zealand. We've always wanted to go, but we kept putting it off, saying, 'Someday.'" I squeezed her hand. Someday is a dangerous word. Today is much better. By the time autumn painted the trees in gold and crimson, I was ready for my next adventure. This time, Thomas's son Alex would join me for 2 weeks in Japan during his college winter break. "Are you sure you want to bring me?" he asked when I extended the invitation. "I've never traveled anywhere outside the U.S. "That's precisely why I want you to come," I told him. "Your first journey abroad should be with someone who can show you how to travel, not just be a tourist." And so, in December, Alex and I found ourselves in Tokyo, navigating the labyrinthine subway system, eating ramen in tiny shops where steam fogged our glasses, and marveling at the juxtaposition of ancient temples beside futuristic skyscrapers. "It's so different," he kept saying. "Everything is different." "Look deeper," I encouraged him. "What's the same?" He began to notice. Parents proudly photographing their children, teenagers laughing over inside jokes, elderly couples walking arm in arm. "People," he said finally. "People are the same everywhere." Exactly. The packaging changes, but the essence remains. Remember that, and you'll never feel completely lost. From Tokyo, we traveled to Kyoto, where I introduced him to my favorite temples, the best okonomiyaki restaurant hidden down an alley too narrow for cars, and the perfect spot to watch the sunset over the city. We stayed in a traditional ryokan, where the innkeeper remembered me from previous visits and treated Alex like a grandson, bringing him special dishes and teaching him proper onsen etiquette. On our last night, as we sat on tatami mats drinking green tea, Alex said, "I get it now. Why you left. Why you keep traveling." "Oh?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you get?" "It's like each place gives you a new piece of yourself, a new way of seeing or being." He struggled to find the words. "Like, I've only been here 2 weeks, but I already feel different. More aware, I guess." I nodded, pleased by his insight. The world is the greatest teacher if we're willing to be students. "Thanks for bringing me," he said simply. "I'll never forget this." "This is just the beginning," I told him. "The world is waiting for you, Alex. All you have to do is show up." When we returned to America, Alex went back to college with new eyes and a growing wanderlust. I continued on to Thailand, where the warm climate and gentle pace suited my winter needs. I had friends there now, expatriates from various countries, local shopkeepers who greeted me by name, a Tai Chi group that met at dawn in a nearby park. I rented the same small apartment I'd had the previous winter, overlooking a canal, where long-tail boats puttered past laden with fruits and vegetables for the floating market. Each morning, I bought fresh mangoes and sticky rice from a woman whose wrinkled face creased into 1,000 joyful lines when she smiled. "You come back," she said in limited English when she first saw me. Same but different. It became our greeting, same but different. A perfect description of how I felt returning to places I had visited before. They were unchanged in essence, but transformed by my perception. Just as I was both the same person who had left America 3 years ago and someone entirely new. In February, Rebecca and her husband joined me for 10 days, their first real vacation without children in years. I showed them my Thailand, not the tourist beaches of Phuket or the backpacker haven of Khao San Road, but the quieter, more authentic places I had discovered through local friends. We rode bicycles through rice paddies, attended a home-cooked dinner at a local family's house, and spent a day learning traditional Thai massage at a school run by Buddhist monks. Rebecca, always the most conventional of my children, surprised me with her willingness to try everything, to step outside her comfort zone. "You were right," she told me as we sat on the banks of the Ping River, watching the sunset turn the water to liquid gold. About everything. About needing to break free, about not waiting until it was too late. "I wasn't right about everything," I said. "Just about what was right for me." She leaned against me, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my heart tightened. But it made us think about what was right for us, too. All of us. Michael in Singapore, Sarah planning her sabbatical, Thomas starting his own business instead of staying in that corporate job he hated. "And you?" I asked gently. She smiled. "I'm finally writing that novel I've talked about for 20 years. 2 chapters down, many to go. But I'm doing it, not just dreaming about it." "I'm proud of you," I told her. "All of you." "We're proud of you too, Dad," she said. "You showed us it's never too late to become who you were meant to be." As the second year of my new lifestyle unfolded, the pattern became more refined. Winters abroad, summers with my family. Each season bringing new discoveries, new connections, new understandings. My grandchildren began to see my visits not as obligations, but as opportunities for adventure. Weekends exploring Chicago's museums with Thomas's kids, camping trips with Sarah's daughters, sailing on Boston Harbor with Rebecca's son Jack, who had inherited his grandfather's love of the water. During my 3rd winter abroad, I received an unexpected message from Michael in Singapore. "I've met someone," he wrote. "Her name is Mei Lin. She's Singaporean, a pediatric surgeon. I'd like you to meet her before anyone else in the family does." I was touched by his request and immediately adjusted my travel plans, flying from Portugal, that winter's chosen destination, to Singapore in early March. Michael met me at Changi Airport, looking both nervous and happy. "She's amazing, Dad," he said as we rode the MRT toward the restaurant where Mei Lin would meet us. "Smart, funny, kind, you'll love her." Mei Lin was indeed all those things. A petite, elegant woman with a direct gaze and a warm laugh. Over dinner, she told me about her work with children, her passion for traditional Chinese medicine as a complement to Western practices, and her love of hiking in Malaysia's rainforests. "Michael tells me you're the family nomad," she said, eyes twinkling. "That at 70 you decided to see the world." 74 now, I corrected with a smile. "And yes, though these days, I divide my time between wandering and family." "I admire that," she said seriously. "In Chinese culture, we respect our elders, but we often expect them to settle, to become fixed points around which the family revolves. You've found a different way." Later, when Mei Lin excused herself for a moment, Michael leaned toward me. "Well, what do you think?" "I think she's wonderful," I said honestly. "And I think you're happy in a way I haven't seen before." He nodded, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "I'm going to ask her to marry me. Not right away, but soon. I wanted your blessing first." "You have it," I said without hesitation. "Completely." 3 months later, Michael and Mei Lin visited Boston, where we had arranged a family reunion to introduce her to the rest of the family. It was the first time all my children and grandchildren had been together in one place since my departure 4 years earlier. We gathered in Rebecca's backyard for a traditional American barbecue. The weather cooperated beautifully, with clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of flowering dogwoods. Watching my family, now expanded to include Mei Lin, who was teaching my youngest grandchildren how to use chopsticks, I felt a profound sense of rightness, of completion. Thomas joined me at the edge of the yard, handing me a cold beer. "Quite a scene, isn't it?" I nodded, taking in the tableau before us. Rebecca and her husband at the grill, Michael and Mei Lin with the children, Sarah and her husband setting up a badminton net. the teenagers on their phones but still part of the gathering. "It's exactly what I hoped for," I said. "Different but the same. Everyone finding their own path but still connected." "You know," Thomas said thoughtfully, "when you first told us you were leaving, I thought you were having some kind of late-life crisis. Running away from grief, from aging, from us." "I was," I admitted. "In part. But I was also running towards something I needed to find." "And did you find it?" I considered the question, watching a monarch butterfly land briefly on a nearby flower before continuing its journey. "I found many things. Peace, purpose, perspective. But most importantly, I found that life doesn't end until it ends. There's always another chapter if you're brave enough to turn the page." Thomas clinked his bottle against mine. "To turning pages, then." "To turning pages," I echoed. The following day, as the family gathered for breakfast, before everyone dispersed to their respective homes, Michael stood, clinking his glass for attention. Maylin beside him looked nervous, but radiant. "We have an announcement," he said, taking her hand. "Last night, I asked Maylin to marry me, and she said yes." The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. Hugs were exchanged, tears shed, plans immediately begun for a wedding that would bridge two cultures, two families, two worlds. In the midst of the joyful chaos, Michael made his way to my side. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "We've decided to get married in Singapore, so Maylin's family can attend, but we're also planning a second ceremony, a smaller one, in that little coastal town in Japan you love so much." I stared at him, speechless for a moment. "Kamakura? But why?" He smiled. "Because that's where you found yourself again, Dad. You've told me so many stories about it. The temple with the giant Buddha. The beach where you watched the sunrise on your 71st birthday. The cafe where the owner taught you to make perfect matcha." He squeezed my shoulder. "We want to honor the journey that brought our family to this moment. Your journey." I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't know what to say. "Say you'll help us plan it," he replied. "Say you'll show us your Japan, the way you've been showing us how to live these past 4 years." Looking around at my family, all of them watching this exchange with warm smiles, I realized that my last year with them had become something none of us could have imagined that night at my birthday dinner. Instead of an ending, it had been a beginning, not just for me, but for all of us. "I would be honored," I told Michael. Then, addressing the whole room, I raised my coffee cup in a toast. "To new beginnings, new adventures, and the courage to say yes to life, at every age." "To courage," they echoed, and in their faces, young and old, familiar and new, I saw the reflection of my own journey, multiplied and magnified, rippling outward in ways I could never have anticipated when I first decided to defy their expectations and chart my own course. As we finished breakfast and began the bittersweet process of goodbyes, each departure, softened by promises of reunions in exotic locations, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The morning sun warmed my face as I thought of Eleanor, of the life we had shared and the dreams we had deferred. "You would love this," I whispered to her memory. "All of it. The travels, the family, the way everything has changed and yet remained essentially the same." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead, and I smiled, imagining her response. "I do love it, Jack. I'm with you in every sunset, every new city, every moment with our children." And in that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that my last year had never truly been about leaving or staying, about choosing between family and freedom. It had been about finding the courage to live fully, authentically, and with purpose, for however many years remained. It had been about showing my children that life is not a straight line but a spiral, constantly circling back to what matters most while still moving forward into new territory. As I went back inside to join my family, I carried this understanding with me, a compass for the journey still unfolding, a light illuminating the path ahead. My 70th year, which might have been an ending, had instead become a gateway to the richest chapter of my life. And for that unexpected gift, I was profoundly grateful. Kamakura welcomed us with a gentle spring rain, the kind that locals call blessing rain, believed to bring good fortune. Michael and Mei Lin had chosen early April for their Japanese ceremony, coinciding with the cherry blossoms that transformed the ancient temple grounds into clouds of pink and white. I had arrived a week earlier to make arrangements, renewing old friendships and introducing myself to the Shinto priest who would perform the ceremony. The small coastal town felt both familiar and new, like returning to a beloved book and discovering chapters you'd somehow missed in previous readings. The family arrived in waves. First Thomas and his teenagers, eager to explore the seaside. Then Sarah and her husband, cameras ready to capture every moment. Finally, Rebecca and her family, jet-lagged but excited. We gathered that first evening at a traditional ryokan I had selected, sitting on floor cushions around a low table, laden with local specialties. Fresh sashimi, tempura vegetables, miso soup rich with seaweed harvested from Sagami Bay. "This is incredible," Rebecca's husband Daniel murmured, awkwardly handling his chopsticks. "So different from what we call Japanese food back home." "The real thing usually is," I replied, helping my youngest granddaughter navigate her meal. "That's why we travel, to taste truth rather than approximation." The next morning, I led them on a tour of my Kamakura. Not just the famous great Buddha and tourist-filled temples, but the hidden shrines tucked between modern buildings, the centuries-old gardens that whispered stories of samurai and poets, the narrow alleys where time seemed to move more slowly. At Hasedera Temple, we paused before thousands of small stone Jizo statues, protectors of children and travelers, each one wearing a hand-knitted red cap or bib placed by grieving parents. "Why are there so many?" Alex asked quietly. "Each represents a child who died before their parents," I explained. In Japanese Buddhist tradition, children who die young cannot cross the Sanzu River to the afterlife because they haven't accumulated enough good deeds. Jizo protects them and helps them cross. Sarah touched one of the statues gently. "It's beautiful, in a heartbreaking way. All this love, still reaching across the divide. That's what I love about Japan," I told them. The visible threads connecting past and present, living and dead, joy and sorrow. Nothing exists in isolation here. As we continued our walk, Rebecca fell into step beside me. "You're different here," she observed. "More. I don't know, centered? Like you found your natural habitat." I smiled. Every place changes us if we let it. Japan taught me patience and mindfulness. Thailand taught me joy and simplicity. Italy taught me passion for beauty and everyday things. I gestured to the path ahead, where my grandchildren were pointing excitedly at a street vendor selling colorful kites. Now I get to share those lessons. The day before the ceremony, Michael and Mei Lin arrived from Singapore. They had already had their official wedding there, a grand affair with hundreds of guests, blending Chinese and Western traditions. But this second ceremony was meant to be intimate, spiritual, a pledge between them witnessed only by family and a few close friends. That evening, we gathered on the beach as the sun set over Enoshima Island. Michael had arranged for lanterns, traditional paper ones that could be lit and released into the night sky, carrying wishes and prayers upward. "Before we send these up," Michael said, "Dad has something to share with us." All eyes turned to me, expectant. I hadn't prepared anything formal, but standing there with the waves murmuring behind me and my family gathered close, words came easily. "5 years ago," I began, "we sat around a table celebrating my 70th birthday. That night, Michael said something that changed everything, that it would be my last year with all of you." Michael winced slightly, but I smiled to show there was no reproach in my words. He was right, though not in the way any of us expected. It was my last year of living half a life, of existing rather than truly living. It was my last year of allowing grief and routine to dictate my choices. I looked around at their faces, illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns. What followed was not an ending, but a beginning, not just for me, but for all of us. I gestured to Michael and Mei Lin, standing hand in hand. Without that moment, without the journey it launched, Michael might never have found the courage to move to Singapore, to open himself to new possibilities, to find Mei Lin. I turned to Thomas. He might never have left corporate security to start his own business. To Sarah, she might not have planned her sabbatical, discovering her passion for photography. To Rebecca, she might not have finally begun writing her novel. My eyes swept over my grandchildren. And all of you might have grown up believing that life shrinks as we age, that possibilities narrow, that adventure belongs only to the young. The waves crashed softly behind me, punctuating my words. Tomorrow we celebrate a union that spans continents and cultures. But tonight, I want to celebrate something equally powerful. The ripple effect of courage. One decision, made in defiance of expectations, can change not just a single life, but generations. Your lives will be different because I chose to leave. Your children's lives will be different because you watched me go and learned that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others is to fully become ourselves. I lifted my unlit lantern. So tonight, as we send these lanterns skyward, I invite each of you to consider: what limiting belief are you ready to release? What unlived dream is waiting for your courage? One by one, we lit our lanterns. One by one, we whispered our private wishes, our intentions, our dreams. And one by one, we released them into the night sky, watching as they joined stars too numerous to count. The ceremony the next day was a blend of traditions: Shinto rituals honoring nature's sacred essence, personal vows Michael and Mei Lin had written, music that bridged east and west. The temple grounds were alive with cherry blossoms, their petals occasionally drifting down like fragrant snow. As I watched my son and his bride sip sake from ceremonial cups, tears blurred my vision. Not tears of sadness or even joy alone, but of something deeper, a recognition of life's perfect imperfection, its cycles of loss and renewal, its endless capacity for surprise. Eleanor should have been here, I thought. She should have seen our son on this day, in this place. And then, as clearly as if she stood beside me, I felt her presence. Not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the accumulated love of our years together, alive in our children, in this moment, in me. "She is here," Sarah whispered, as if reading my thoughts. She squeezed my hand. "In all of us." The celebration continued into the evening, moving from the temple to a nearby restaurant where a private room overlooked the sea. We dined on exquisite kaiseki cuisine, multiple small courses, each one a work of art representing the season and the region. The younger grandchildren grew restless with the formal meal and slow pace, so I taught them the paper crane folding I had learned years before. Soon, a flock of origami birds populated our table, some more elegant than others, but each one unique. In Japan, there's a belief that folding 1,000 paper cranes grants you a wish, I told them. But I think the real magic isn't in the wish. It's in the patience, the attention, the care you give to each fold. Life is in the process, not just the result. Later, as conversations flowed around the table in multiple languages, English predominantly, but also Mei Lin's Mandarin, bits of Japanese I had taught the others, even Rebecca's hesitant French, I found myself watching, rather than participating, treasuring the tableau before me. My family had expanded not just in number but in perspective. These were no longer people bound by geography and habit, limited by fear or convention. They had become citizens of a wider world, curious explorers, lifelong learners. "Penny for your thoughts, old man," Thomas said, refilling my sake cup. I smiled at his use of Eleanor's expression, now passed down through generations. "I was thinking about legacy," I replied. "Not in the traditional sense of money or property, but in how we influence each other, how our choices create ripples that continue long after we're gone." "Your legacy is already secure," he said, gesturing to the table where Michael was translating something Mei Lin had said, causing everyone to laugh. "Look what you've created here, not by holding on, but by letting go." The party continued late into the night, but eventually, jet lag claimed the travelers one by one. As the gathering dwindled, I slipped outside onto the restaurant's wooden deck that jutted over the beach. The night was clear, stars impossibly bright over the dark expanse of the Pacific. Michael joined me, leaning on the railing. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For everything. For being brave enough to leave. For showing us how to live." He looked out at the ocean. "I used to think courage was about grand gestures, heroic moments. But watching you these past 5 years, I've realized it's about small decisions made consistently. Getting up each day and choosing possibility over fear." I nodded, touched by his insight. "It's never too late to make that choice," I said. "That's the most important thing I've learned." "What's next for you?" he asked. "After this?" I considered the question, watching the rhythmic sweep of a distant lighthouse beam across the water. "I have an idea brewing," I admitted. "Something that combines my love of travel with everything I've learned about connecting across cultures." "I'm intrigued," he said, smiling. "Tell me more." "I've been thinking about leading small group journeys. Not conventional tours, but something more meaningful. Intergenerational trips for grandparents and grandchildren, designed to bridge not just geographical distances, but the gaps between generations." I turned to face him. "What do you think? Too ambitious for a 75-year-old? Michael laughed. "Dad, after everything you've done, too ambitious isn't in your vocabulary anymore. I think it's brilliant." The next day, as we prepared to disperse, some returning directly to America, others extending their stay in Japan or continuing on to other destinations, I found myself thinking about circles, about how life rarely moves in straight lines, but instead spirals back around, touching familiar points from new perspectives. 5 years ago, I had left my family to find myself. Now, having found more than I ever expected, I was bringing that self back to them, not as the father and grandfather they had tried to protect and contain, but as someone who had gifts to offer, wisdom to share, and still more to learn. 6 months later, I launched Bridge Journeys, my small venture designed to connect generations through travel. The concept was simple: carefully crafted experiences that allowed grandparents and grandchildren to discover new cultures together, each bringing their unique perspective to the journey. My first group consisted of 4 pairs, including Thomas and his daughter Mia, who had just turned 18 and wanted to mark the occasion with an adventure rather than a traditional party. We traveled to Japan, where I now had connections and deep knowledge, exploring Tokyo's blend of ultramodern and traditional, the spiritual calm of Kyoto's temples, and finally, my beloved Kamakura. Watching these grandparents and grandchildren discover together, the elders offering context and patience, the youth contributing energy and fresh eyes, I felt a sense of completion, as if my own journey had been preparing me for this all along. "You found your ikigai," Thomas observed one evening as we watched Mia teaching 2 other teenagers how to use chopsticks, while their grandparents looked on with pride and amusement. "My what?" I asked, though I knew the term from my time in Japan. "Your ikigai," he repeated. "That intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. This," he gestured to the group, "is where all those circles overlap for you." He was right. Bridge Journeys wasn't just a business or even a passion project. It was the perfect synthesis of everything I had become in my last year, that had stretched into 5 transformative years and promised many more. The venture grew slowly but organically. I led only 4 journeys a year, keeping the group small and the experiences authentic. Word spread, primarily through personal recommendations, attracting families who valued connection over luxury, meaning over checklist tourism. Between journeys, I maintained my migratory lifestyle, winters abroad, summers with my expanding family. Michael and Mei Lin welcomed a daughter, naming her Eleanor after my late wife. Rebecca finished her novel and, to everyone's surprise, including our own, found a publisher. Sarah's photography from her sabbatical in New Zealand was featured in a travel magazine, launching a side career that brought her almost as much satisfaction as her main profession. As I approached my 80th birthday, my children began planning a celebration. Nothing too elaborate, I cautioned them during a video call. At my age, simply waking up each morning is celebration enough. "You don't fool us anymore, Dad," Rebecca laughed. "You've got more energy at 80 than most people half your age. Besides," Michael added, "we want to do something special. It's not every day our father turns 80 and celebrates 5 years of his successful business." In the end, they surprised me with a gathering that perfectly captured who we had all become. Instead of a traditional party in someone's home, they arranged for us to meet in central Italy, a farmhouse in Tuscany with enough rooms for the entire extended family, now including partners, children, and even a few close friends who had become honorary family members over the years. For a week, we lived like locals, shopping at the village market, cooking together in the farmhouse's rustic kitchen, exploring the countryside on foot and by bicycle. The younger grandchildren practiced Italian with shopkeepers who pinched their cheeks and slipped them candies. The teenagers, initially skeptical of a family vacation without reliable Wi-Fi, discovered the joy of sunset conversations on the terrace and midnight swims in the pool beneath a canopy of stars. On the evening of my actual birthday, we gathered around a long table set up in the olive grove. Strings of lights hung from the gnarled branches, casting a golden glow over the assembled faces. The meal, prepared by all of us together, featured local specialties we had learned to make: hand-rolled pasta with wild mushrooms, roasted vegetables from the garden, bread still warm from the stone oven. After the main course but before dessert, Michael stood, raising his glass of Chianti. "A toast," he announced, "to the man who taught us that it's never too late to rewrite your story." A chorus of agreement rose from the table. "5 years ago," he continued, "I told Dad that it would be his last year with us. I meant it as concern, even love, but it came from a place of fear. Fear of losing him, fear of change, fear of the unknown." He looked at me, his eyes bright with emotion. What I didn't understand then was that by trying to keep him safe, to keep him close, we were diminishing him. We were asking him to become smaller when he still had so much growing to do. Mei Lin placed her hand over his, their wedding bands catching the light. "Dad chose to grow instead," Michael said. "And in doing so, he helped all of us grow too. He showed us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. That the richest chapters of our lives can come at any age if we're brave enough to turn the page." He raised his glass higher. "So here's to you, Dad. Thank you for your last year that became so much more for all of us." As glasses clinked and voices called out, "To Dad!" and "To Grandpa!" I felt a fullness that transcended happiness, a sense of rightness that went beyond satisfaction. This moment, surrounded by 3 generations under an Italian sky, each person present carrying a piece of my legacy while forging their own, was the culmination of a journey that began with a single, defiant yes to life. Later that evening, as the party wound down and family members drifted off to their rooms, I remained at the table, savoring the remains of my wine and the lingering scent of candles recently extinguished. The night was velvet dark and alive with the sounds of cicadas and distant owls. I thought of Eleanor, as I often did in quiet moments. "You would love who they've become," I whispered to her memory. "Who we've all become." A soft breeze stirred the olive leaves, and I imagined her reply. "I always knew what was possible. I was just waiting for you all to discover it too." The path from that birthday dinner 5 years ago to this moment had been neither straight nor predictable. There had been challenges along the way. Health scares, misunderstandings, moments of doubt. But the journey itself had been the gift, not despite its difficulties, but because of them. Because each obstacle overcome had strengthened our capacity for joy. As I prepared to join my slumbering family, I paused at the edge of the olive grove, looking back at the table where we had celebrated. The empty plates and glasses, the scattered flower petals, the chairs still arranged in a circle of connection. In that moment, I understood that my last year had never truly ended. It had simply transformed, expanding to contain multitudes. New countries explored, new relationships formed, new dimensions of myself discovered and shared. The greatest journey, I realized, is not measured in miles traveled or stamps in a passport, but in how fully we allow ourselves to be changed by the people and places we encounter. It is about remaining open to possibility, to wonder, to growth, no matter our age or circumstances. "Good night," I whispered to the stars, to Eleanor, to the universe that had shown me such unexpected gifts. And thank you for this endless last year. May it continue as long as breath remains. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.